My landlord tried to evict me for no reason, so I exposed his illegal practices and got him shut down. Hey, I'm Sarah, 28 years old, and I live in a cozy apartment in downtown Chicago. The city has always felt like home to me, the kind of place where the streets hum with energy and there's always something to do. I've spent the last few years working hard as a freelance writer, living on my own, and trying to build a life for myself. Things were going well, until my landlord, Greg, decided to make my life a living nightmare. It all started on a seemingly normal Tuesday. I had just finished writing a new piece and was feeling pretty proud of myself. I sat down with a cup of coffee, scrolling through emails, when I got a letter under my door. It wasn't the usual package or flyers from local businesses. It was an eviction notice. The letter was formal, official-looking, and addressed to me in bold, capital letters. My heart sank as I read through it. Notice of eviction, immediate action required. I could feel my pulse quickening. I hadn't done anything wrong. My rent was always paid on time, I kept the apartment in good condition, and I had never caused any trouble. So why was this happening? I picked up the phone and dialed Greg's number, my landlord. He answered on the second ring, his voice sounding almost too cheerful. "Hey, Sarah, how's it going?" he said casually. I barely managed to get out the words, "Greg, I just got an eviction notice. What is this?" There was a long pause on the other end. Then Greg sighed. "Yeah, Sarah, we're having some issues with the building, and I'm afraid you're going to have to move out." "But," I stammered, "I haven't done anything wrong. My rent is always paid, and the apartment is fine. Why are you evicting me?" There was another pause, but this time Greg's tone shifted. He became less friendly, more dismissive. "Look, Sarah, it's not personal. Just pack up and leave. I'll give you a week." A week? What was he talking about? I hadn't even been given a reason. My mind raced, and I felt the panic rising in my chest. I had no family nearby to help me move, no savings to cover the cost of a new apartment on such short notice. And honestly, I was in shock. This was all happening too fast. I needed answers. I wasn't going to let him push me around without a fight. I grabbed my phone again and started searching for anything that could help me. The first thing I did was look into tenant rights in Illinois. I learned quickly that landlords can't just evict tenants without a valid reason or proper notice. The whole situation didn't sit right with me, and I knew something wasn't adding up. I decided to take action. The next day, I went to a local tenant rights group for advice. They told me that Greg's actions were not only unethical, but they might also be illegal. There were certain procedures he had to follow, and he hadn't done any of that. He hadn't given me a chance to fix any supposed issues, nor had he served me with the proper notices required by law. Armed with this new knowledge, I decided to confront him. The next time I saw Greg, I was prepared. He showed up unannounced at my door, as if he were trying to intimidate me into leaving. But instead, I was the one who caught him off guard. "Greg, we need to talk," I said, my voice steady, even though my heart was pounding in my chest. "I've looked into my rights as a tenant, and what you're trying to do is illegal." He blinked at me, clearly not expecting me to have done any research. "What do you mean? I'm just trying to make sure this building stays in good shape." I shook my head. "That's not what's happening here. You can't just evict me without a valid reason. You haven't followed the legal process, and you've been doing this to other tenants too, haven't you?" Greg looked at me, his face going pale. He was caught, but instead of backing down, he tried to shift the blame. "I'm just doing my job, Sarah. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." I could feel my anger rising. This wasn't just about me anymore. This was about all the tenants he'd taken advantage of. I knew I couldn't let him get away with it. "I'm not going anywhere until this is resolved," I said firmly. "And if I have to, I'll take legal action." Greg just shook his head, muttering something under his breath as he walked away. But I could see the fear in his eyes. He knew I wasn't going to back down. Over the next few days, I took every step I could to protect myself and the other tenants in the building. I started gathering evidence of Greg's illegal practices. I spoke with my neighbors, many of whom had been through similar issues with him. I documented everything, every email, every conversation, every notice he had sent. The more I collected, the clearer it became. Greg was running a racket. He'd been evicting tenants without reason, violating rental laws, and charging illegal fees. I contacted a lawyer who helped me understand the full extent of what Greg had been doing. My lawyer confirmed that I had a strong case, and he recommended that I file a formal complaint against Greg and the management company that employed him. The more I learned, the more infuriating it became. This wasn't just a case of a bad landlord. It was a pattern of exploitation and abuse. As the days passed, I became determined not just to protect myself, but to bring justice to all the people who had suffered because of Greg. I filed the complaint, and soon enough, the investigation into Greg's practices began. It didn't take long before other tenants started speaking up too, sharing their own horror stories of how Greg had mistreated them. The investigation into Greg's illegal practices gained momentum quickly. As more tenants came forward, it became clear that he had been exploiting his position for years. It wasn't just the illegal evictions. He'd been charging tenants hidden fees, refusing to make necessary repairs, and even threatening retaliation if anyone dared to speak out. The more I learned, the angrier I became. I wasn't just fighting for myself anymore. I was fighting for everyone who had been too scared to stand up to him, everyone who had suffered in silence while he took advantage of them. I could feel the weight of this responsibility, but it also gave me strength. This wasn't just about one person's unfair eviction. It was about taking down someone who had been getting away with this for far too long. My lawyer helped me file a formal complaint with the Illinois Department of Human Rights, and soon after, a local news station picked up the story. Once the press got involved, things started moving even faster. Greg's reputation quickly started to crumble. Tenants who had been too afraid to come forward in the past now felt empowered to share their stories. I was amazed at how many people had been affected by him. In the meantime, Greg tried to retaliate. He sent me more threatening letters, claiming that I was in breach of my lease for some minor issues that had never been mentioned before. But I wasn't intimidated. I had the law on my side now, and I knew that I had a strong case. One afternoon, as I was going through more paperwork in my apartment, I received an unexpected call. It was from the building's management company, the same company that employed Greg. I braced myself for another confrontation, but this time, the call was different. The voice on the other end of the line was apologetic. "Hi, Sarah," the woman said. "This is Karen from the management office. I just wanted to let you know that we've been made aware of the situation, and we're conducting an internal review. We're sorry for any inconvenience Greg has caused you." I didn't know what to make of this sudden change in tone. The management company had always turned a blind eye to Greg's actions, so hearing an apology felt a little too late. But I kept my composure. "Karen, it's not just about inconvenience. What Greg has done is illegal, and I'm not going to stop until he's held accountable." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. "We're taking this seriously," Karen finally said. "You'll hear from us soon." I didn't trust them, not after everything that had happened. But the fact that they were reaching out meant something had changed. The pressure was building, and Greg was finally starting to feel the heat. His illegal practices were no longer a secret, and the walls were closing in on him. In the following weeks, things escalated quickly. The Department of Human Rights launched a full investigation into Greg's actions, and his management company began distancing itself from him. It wasn't long before Greg was suspended from his position, and soon after, he was fired. The management company was also hit with fines for failing to oversee their employees properly and for not addressing tenant complaints sooner. But the real victory came when Greg was ordered to pay restitution to the tenants he had wronged. The case was a landmark one, and it sent a powerful message that no landlord, no matter how powerful or influential, was above the law. It felt like justice, not just for me, but for everyone who had been taken advantage of. When I heard the news that Greg had been shut down and his practices exposed, a sense of relief washed over me. The battle had been long, and there were moments when I thought I might not make it through. But I did, and in the end, I had helped to stop a man who had been hurting so many others. After everything that had happened, I moved out of the apartment I had fought so hard to keep. I didn't want to stay in a building that had been tainted by Greg's actions. But as I packed up my things, I felt a deep sense of accomplishment. I had stood up for myself and for others, and in the process, I had helped to expose a system of abuse that had gone unchecked for far too long. The legal battles were over, but the personal ones weren't. I had changed as a person, stronger, more aware of the power I had to fight back against injustice. It wasn't just about winning the case, it was about reclaiming my sense of agency, my ability to make a difference. I want to leave you with one thing. Don't ever let someone push you around. No matter how big, how powerful, or how intimidating they seem, you have the right to stand up for yourself. I may have been just one person, but my actions prove that one person can make a difference. If you ever find yourself in a situation like mine, don't back down. Seek help, gather your evidence, and don't be afraid to speak out. If this story resonated with you, share it. Maybe it'll inspire someone else to stand up for what's right. Remember, change starts with you. If you've ever dealt with an unfair landlord or tenant abuse, let me know in the comments. Let's keep this conversation going and support each other. If you're dealing with something like this right now, I want you to know that you're not alone. Don't be afraid to speak up.